You know, every salesperson kind of dreads hearing the word no. But what if I told you that most objections aren't really roadblocks at all? What if they're actually secret pathways to getting a yes? Today, we're going to break down the strategies to turn that resistance into your biggest advantage.
We've all been there, right? You're in a great conversation, everything is clicking, it feels like a sure thing. And then, poof, the whole thing just stalls out. And you're left sitting there thinking, wait, what just happened? Well, here's a really interesting idea. Often, the biggest barrier isn't something your prospect actually says out loud. Nope. It's what their body language is practically screaming at you. So, let's start right there. We're going to decode the single most common nonverbal cue that signals disagreement or defensiveness or just, that unspoken resistance.
Okay, so what's so fascinating about this is the psychology behind it. Crossing your arms, it's this universal thing we do, often without even thinking about it. It's a subconscious attempt to literally build a barrier to protect our vital organs, our heart and lungs, and to block out something that we see as a threat.
And here's the thing, our body language is usually way more honest than our words. If you see someone do this, it is a giant red flag. It probably means you've said something they really don't agree with. And honestly, it's pretty much pointless to keep trying to make your case until you figure out what's causing that negative vibe. Okay, so now let's talk about the objections you do hear, the ones people actually say. The very first step here is a total game changer. It's a huge mindset shift in how you even think about them. Think about it like this. Most of what salespeople hear, they aren't real hardcore deal-breaking objections. They're more like automatic complaints. Kind of like when someone just casually comments on the weather. They don't really mean much. Unless, of course, you make them mean something.
And this slide just lays it out perfectly. Look at this. The prospect says, "That's a lot of money." In the first column, you just say, "I understand," and you move on. You've treated it like a passing comment. But in that second column, if you jump in and start defending the price, well, you just took their little complaint and turned it into a real solid objection that you now have to fight.
So what happens if that little comment keeps coming up and does start to feel like a real objection? Well, the absolute worst thing you can do is argue. Instead, it's time to stop being a salesperson and start being a detective. You gotta become a diagnostician. I mean, just look at the difference here. The average salesperson hears too expensive, and what do? They immediately launch into a defense of all the features and benefits, which just makes the other person feel like they're not being heard. But the new model salesperson? They ask a super simple but really powerful question. What do you mean by that? And boom, that opens the door to the actual problem. This whole approach is part of a framework called NEPQ, which stands for Neuro-Emotional Persuasion Questioning. But all you really need to know is that it's about diagnosis. You just listen, you ask questions to clarify, you dig down to find the emotional core of the issue, and then you help the prospect see for themselves how your solution is the perfect fit. You're not pushing anymore, you're guiding them.
And that brings us to the big one, the most common and by far the most misunderstood objection in all of sales, the price.
You know that old belief that price is the #1 reason sales fall apart? Well, it turns out that's a total myth. The real problem, almost every single time, is a lack of confidence. The buyer just isn't sure that your thing is the right thing to solve their problem.
So, okay, if price isn't the real monster under the bed, what do you do when a customer looks you in the eye and says, "That costs too much"? How are you supposed to handle that?
Well, get ready for this because the answer is completely counterintuitive, and it goes against pretty much everything most salespeople are ever taught. You don't offer a discount. You actually show them something that costs more. Let's just walk through how this works. A customer says your product is too expensive. Instead of immediately showing them a cheaper option, you show them the premium, more expensive version. Now here's the key. If they even consider it for a second, you've just proven that money wasn't the real issue at all. The real issue was that they weren't confident in the first product. And just like that, the entire conversation shifts away from price and toward value and finding the absolute right solution for them. So here's the crucial point, the thing to really let sink in. For any buyer, the #1 fear isn't about spending too much money. It's about making a mistake. It's about buying the wrong thing. So by helping them feel confident that they're making the right choice, you're actually addressing their biggest fear. All right, let's bring this all home. Here is the new framework, the 4 steps that can totally transform how you handle any objection that comes your way.
First, you've got to read that silent no in their body language. Second, remember to treat those spoken objections like they're just minor complaints until proven otherwise. Third, stop arguing and start diagnosing the real issue with good questions. And finally, bust that price myth by moving them up in price, not down, to keep the focus on finding the right solution. At the end of the day, an objection isn't a dead end. It's really just a doorway. So the only question left is, what hidden concern are you going to uncover the next time you walk through it?